Hey, what's going on, everyone? My name is Matt Jarbo. This is $3 Theater. And, it's been 15 months since Star Wars The Last Jedi has come out, and we have spent a lot of time talking about it here on the channel. I've spent a lot of time lamenting about it here on the channel. But one of the things I find to be the most interesting, and I truly mean this, is the level that parts of the media will go to defend Rian Johnson. And it doesn't ever seem to stop. 15 months in, and they are still defending him like some people still defend Ghostbusters 2016. It's been 3 years since that thing, or almost 2.5 years since it came out, and people still write op-eds defending the movie, which is their right, but it's also interesting when we take a look at them and break it down, which is why yesterday, over on comicbookresources.com, we had this article pop up from Narayan Liu titled, "Sorry, Last Jedi haters, but Rian Johnson may be Star Wars savior." Now, listen, I can look at this and laugh like the rest of you, but I thought we'd give it a fair enough-ish shake. We take a look at it, break it down, look at her points, or his points. I'm not too sure if it's a man or woman. I can't quite tell. Sorry. And we'll take a look at their points and we'll break them down because they took the time to write it. I can take the time to respond to it. Now, saying here, a substantial portion of the Star Wars fan base was turned off the franchise after Rian Johnson's The Last Jedi in 2017. Though a substantial amount of the outrage people saw online following the film's cinematic release was evidently due to Russian bots, that's not true. That was so dumb. There were more than a few real fans who negatively reacted to the film and toward Johnson, who wrote and directed it. There were quite a few fans. I'd argue that the vast majority of them actually were not super pleased with the movie upon its release 15 months ago. There were people that initially enjoyed it because they felt that, that sudden urge watching it in the theater. They felt that happiness, like, oh my God, Star Wars. They walked out kind of in a weird euphoric state, but then it kind of went away, as it happened with many of us. Never mind the fact that you're still hard pressed to find lots of people here on YouTube that have argued favorably towards the film. You're going to find more of those people on Twitter, which again, like I like to point out here, 1.5 billion people on YouTube, 316 million people on Twitter. The numbers don't quite match. But anyway, going on to say here, that was exemplified by the events that unfolded on Twitter recently when a rumor began to circulate that Johnson was going to be stepping back from the franchise and that his planned trilogy had been canceled. These rumors spread fast thanks in part to Super Bro Movies, only to be debunked just as quickly, much to the disappointment of Johnson's most ardent detractors. The site has since published an apology, which Johnson humbly accepted, which is true. All of that is true. There are a lot of Star Wars fans out there that would love to see Rian Johnson removed from the franchise just because of a few elements of The Last Jedi, which is somewhat unreasonable. It's not that there's small moments in The Last Jedi. We're talking legacy character defining moments. Legacy character defining moments. Imagine the reaction if somebody were to take Woody from Toy Story, one of the most beloved characters in pop culture over the span of the last 5 years, and then take a gigantic shit on Woody and call it art. People would be upset. People would be very upset. It's kind of what happened here. It is. Now, it says here that the film was far from perfect, and some of the most vocal critics have established some valid reasons for wanting to shun it, criticizing specific elements as opposed to writing off the entire film like some. However, no matter what your stance is on the matter, there's no denying that Johnson was able to produce something unique, which is exactly what Star Wars franchise needs going forward. Now, with that, I will agree. Johnson did create something unique. He did. That is true. The movie was directed well. I've always said that. I stand by that. He created something unique. Unique does not equal good, but unique and new is what Star Wars needs to do going forward. The franchise is theatrically trapped in the Skywalker saga, and it does need to break away from that. Solo was kind of the first movie to not feature any bit of the Skywalkers, but it failed in regards to how it did, so it's still, there's still problems there, obviously, but yes, I would argue that the film franchise needs something unique, but all that uniqueness seems to be going to the TV side of things right now. So anyway, it says before some of you leave to grab your pitchforks, let's look at what the film saga thus far has brought us. along with the anthology films and the television shows. The original trilogy offered something new to cinema with its setting, characters, and concepts. The story revolved around Luke Skywalker discovering the Force, learning how to connect with it, and break through the limitations he posed on himself so he could set free his father and the galaxy from the Emperor. The prequel trilogy built on that by presenting the story of Anakin Skywalker to show us how someone so could easily fall, no matter how noble their drive. Both of those statements are in fact true, and both of those statements are in fact something that I think is good. But that's fine. You're basically building up Lucas in this particular case, not something that needed to be done, but all right. Going on to say here that it's been 40 years since A New Hope, and the franchise continues to revolve around Skywalker bloodline without really providing audiences with anything new. To do that, Lucasfilm has nearly exhausted the franchise of any kind of much-needed mystery until we've started to see the smallest details are being mined for narrative-building material. Nowhere was that more painfully so than Solo, which many fans found to misuse the characters and world at its disposal in order to expand on generally uninteresting details like the origin of those dice or how Han Solo got his blaster. It's not that those were like key factors, though. It's not that they were really key factors. Like, yeah, the dice, when I saw them in The Last Jedi, I'm like, that's obviously going to be a big part of Solo. But looking at what they represented in Solo's connection to his youth, Solo's connection to Kira, how he wanted to find her, how he loves her, how that was going to play into the larger narrative of what was probably going to be a Solo trilogy if the movie had done well. There were aspects that played with those dice. Those dice were meant to represent Han and Han's desire for whatever it is Han desired, but also tied to his past. And I think that was a big part of it. That was one of the reasons why I think the dice represent love to Han, which is one of the reasons why Luke impressioned those to Leia. Talk about just taking it back, right? When he vanished, so did the dice. But the dice are still on Ahch-To. They might be in his pocket, or they might be on the Millennium Falcon right now, chilling out with Rey and Chewbacca. Now, the entirety of Rogue One revolved around one very specific detail from A New Hope, and it was a great film, but using minor details from beloved films as a basis for an entire story is no way to continue a franchise. Star Wars, with regard to the films in particular, needs to start innovating characters and stories. Well, they kind of did that with Clone Wars, the TV show, didn't they? I mean, it talked about the Clone Wars briefly in the movies. We got Attack of the Clones. That was the start of the Clone War. We got a bit of the Clone War in Revenge of the Sith, but there was still that gap between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, which is exactly what the Clone Wars explored upon, with the Skywalker as being the centerpiece. And that is more beloved, I think, in some regards than the prequel trilogy, at least the second and third film in the prequel trilogy, because of that. Now, outside of the comic books, novels, and video games, Star Wars franchise has always seemed trapped in the same story about the Skywalker family, the fall of the Republic, and the rise of the Empire. The sequel trilogy has inched away from it when it should have made strides. When the franchise returned to cinemas with The Force Awakens, directed by Abrams, fans excitedly praised the film, only to realize over time, after the nostalgia charm wore off, that the film, including its plot and some of its characters, were complete replicas of A New Hope. A Force-sensitive hero from a desert planet is forced to leave their home, meet Han and Chewie, and embark on a dangerous mission to destroy a Death Star, or in this case, a Death Planet. The only truly unique character is a former Stormtrooper, which, yes, that is very true. And JJ was very clear about that, how he wanted it to feel familiar, like it was feeling like it was going home. And I think he realized that he might have played up those particular angles a bit too much, which might be one of the reasons why Rian Johnson, who was writing The Last Jedi while they were finishing up The Force Awakens, decided to completely abandon all of that. He could have felt it as well, but he just did it in a not good way. I think not good is the right answer there. Now, there are different faces and names. That's virtually all the film had to offer the franchise, which did not bode well for the sequel trilogy. Well, it would have. Daisy Ridley said that J.J. Abrams had plotted out the second and third film, that he had set up plot points, he had set up payoffs that were going to pay off in the second and third movie with The Force Awakens. We know this. And then Rian Johnson went like Thanos snap and wiped all of it out. And yet, again, going back to that Woody analogy, took a big steaming pile on it, and then we're meant to go, chocolate pudding. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't work that way. Now, enter The Last Jedi, which brought audiences a new tone, new characters, concepts, and more while adhering to the plot it had to continue. Again, the film definitely had its flaws. No one is claiming The Last Jedi was the greatest Star Wars film of all time. That is not true. That is not true. Go read Twitter, and you will find people saying that up and down, up and down, up and down, all while deriding anyone who criticizes the film as being a sexist, misogynist bigot. That is something we see all the time. It may not have been the greatest, but out of the series that we've seen so far, it was definitely the most intriguing. Based on the marketing, yes, 100%. The marketing was very intriguing. The movie, not intriguing doesn't, again, equal good. Intriguing doesn't even equal remotely interesting. It's just, oh, that's intriguing. And then the more you dig past the surface, you realize that it's just really hollow. Star Wars: The Last Jedi was entirely based on hollow ground. It was built on a hollow, it was built on hollow ground, basically. That's what it was. It was trying to use the foundation set before, but it decided to shift away from that foundation, which was settled in some pop culture nostalgic bedrock, so to speak, if you want to use a building analogy here. But ultimately, it moved itself over to shaky ground. It built itself up like a house of cards, and upon just even the slightest bit of pushback, the entire narrative structure of The Force Awakens, or not Force Awakens, but The Last Jedi, crumbles immensely. It just immensely. Now, Rian Johnson wasn't afraid to play around with everything the franchise had introduced in the past. The Force was used in new and exciting ways, and the Resistance employed different strategies that may not have been practical, but were certainly gorgeous to watch. So what kind of defense is that? Oh, it wasn't a practical use for a Holdo to do that maneuver when anyone else could have done it. But it was gorgeous to watch, which is true. Admiral Akbar should have been the one to sacrifice himself, considering they were trying to build up a new character, and we're supposed to care about Admiral Holdo as she's some badass military tactician, even though we never met her before, and now she's dead, so we're never going to meet her again. Our experiences with Holdo, much like Rose Tico, are just only over a short set period of time, and no one really cares. No one really cares because you're not given the moment in time. You're not given the time to care. People cared about Luke Skywalker and Leia and Han Solo because they had 40 years to do it. There is a difference there. You had to give these characters more time to breathe. They didn't do it. That is just bad writing. I'm sorry. It's terrible writing. Yes, gorgeous to watch. As I said, the movie was directed very well. The narrative was bad. And this feels like it's just trying to oh, well, they used the Force in new and exciting ways. Yes, you did. Yes, the Carrie Poppins scene will live on in infamy as being just, oh, wow, that exists. Now, it says here, the film even introduced fresh mysteries to familiar characters like Luke Skywalker. What? What was their fresh mysteries? What was there fresh mysteries of? There were no fresh mysteries. He was living like a hermit on Octu. Why? Because he was pissed off at himself for almost killing his nephew. Even then, a lot of people were like, what took the most optimistic man in the galaxy and forced him to almost commit nephew-cide? Yeah, I made that word up. Deal with it. Skywalker, who was depicted as a bitter old hermit, said of the perfect hero everyone expected him to be. No, you can make him flawed. You can make him flawed, but they didn't do anything with him. He had no real character growth. He was just flawed and bitter until the end when he force teleported himself using the Force doppelganger, which is not even considered canon anymore because it was a book produced during the EU, and Rian Johnson pulled from that. So, whatever, dude, pull it out your ass on that one. Anyway, it's far more interesting and adds more depth to the character. No, it doesn't. Making him a bitter old man, but not fully going through the process of what caused him, of him watching Kylo go down the dark path, go and see what happened, watching Kylo being influenced by something, giving us something there to have us empathize with Luke's actions. We were meant to empathize with Kylo in that moment in time, leading us down the subversive expectation that Kylo was in fact going to turn to the light because he had that moment taken away from him ultimately when his uncle tried to kill him. But we didn't see any of Snoke's influence. We didn't see any of him learning about the Order of Ren and then also forming the Knights of Ren. We learned nothing about the characters. There was nothing. The plot line was stagnant in the Force, or in The Last Jedi. All it did is move it on the galaxy's slowest car chase, only to lose mostly everything due to extremely dumb maneuvers by Captain Holdo. Now, whether you agree or not, it's undeniable that Johnson has some original ideas to offer, and he's likely going to prove that with this trilogy, unhindered by the need to build anything around audiences have seen dozens of times already. That much is absolutely true. That much is absolutely true. I will agree with her on that front. Fans have expressed their resentment for what they perceive to be Disney's attempt at squeezing the beloved title for every toy and merchandising opportunity it can get. Rian Johnson, who has proven himself an avid Star Wars fan, can change that by creating a unique story, not only because he wants to help sell toys, but because he has a story he wants to tell that will make the galaxy far, far away feel that much bigger. So to the overly critical fans, we'll say this: Rian Johnson hasn't ruined the Star Wars franchise. He's brought hope to it. But what hope is that specifically? That's my question. What hope is that specifically? What you're looking at here is a story, is a fluff piece, is an op-ed fluff piece, propping up Rian Johnson without ever actually going into the details about Rian Johnson's movie that would back up this person's point. There's no example given. Oh, he used the Force in new and exciting ways without detailing why, how it helped benefit the story. Talked about Luke Skywalker's character, who was depicted as being the bitter old hermit. And then that was more interesting to watch him be that type of bitter old man that ultimately comes to learn that he can't control everything. Sure, fine. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the conclusion of Luke's growth of a character, but his death from Force exhaustion just was, I don't know, not warranted, not needed. If Leia can survive in the vacuum of space and pull herself in after being blown the F up on the freaking deck of this starship, and she can live out there for a couple minutes and get back in and only have just a head wound and be passed out, why can't Luke do that too? Why can't Luke survive what happened? Why did Luke have to quote unquote die? That's why I'm thinking that he's ultimately not dead. I think that Mark Hamill is not dead in the movie, because what we saw from Carrie Poppins' scene shows us that they can do very crazy things. Now, I would say that there's a deleted scene that showed that the wound when Kylo cut through Luke on the battle on Crate, that Luke was holding his side, and that was what killed him. That even though he had Force teleported himself across the galaxy, somehow knowing exactly where they were at all the time to get there, and then was wounded by it, showcased also a little bit of the Force projection that brought Kylo and Rey together, and they touched a little bit. Now, if that would have been explained, if that would have been what killed him, if that would have been that moment where he had materialized in his actual form at that moment in time, it would have made more sense, because it would have tied in with what we had previously seen. But they never showed us that. They never showed us anything. This was a movie that showed instead of told, which usually works. But in this case, we needed some things to be told and then also shown for the dots to connect. Rian Johnson is not a good storyteller. He's a good director. I give him that, but he's not a good storyteller. So while this article is trying to prop up Rian Johnson as a way to get clicks and views, my video here is going to tear it down as a way to get clicks and views. I'm not going to lie. This sort of thing needs to be broken down, because the author here clearly doesn't know what they're talking about. They approach the idea of, oh, Rian Johnson is the savior of Star Wars. No, he's not. He's like the Paul Feig of Star Wars. He came on in and did a movie, everyone hated it. So they're going back to what worked for the next one. They're going to do what they can to soft reboot it, to act like The Last Jedi never happened. And the great thing about The Last Jedi simply is this: yes, they can actually act like it never happened outside of the passing of Carrie Fisher. So little actually happened over that 2 hour and 45 minute long movie that they actually can go back and treat it like most of it never happened. Really. Because what did happen in that movie? No, really, think about it. What actually progressed the plot forward? Outside of the killing of Snoke, which no mention of that. No mention of taking a cool villain and turning him into a prop for a badass throne room fight scene. No mention of how we subverted expectations there. No mention of Kylo Ren's arc being total. And I will admit, I kind of liked Kylo Ren's arc in the movie. So I want to see where it's going to go, because it was going to go one way where, oh, Kylo could go good. And then that failed. It felt like two movies wrapped into one. So no, Rian Johnson is not the savior of Star Wars. He set it back by literally 4 years. He set it back to The Force Awakens, because so many people have looked at it going like, I don't even like The Force Awakens anymore because of how bad The Last Jedi is, because of the plot points that J.J. Abrams set up, what he was going to tell us, that particular fantasy journey he was going to take us on, that yes, probably pulled tropes from old stories, just like Star Wars did. You know, there's only 7 stories you can tell, sort of thing. But we're not going to get that story because somebody wanted to subvert expectations in the middle film of a trilogy. And not just a trilogy, like one of the trilogies. See what I'm saying here? He didn't save anything. He's not going to bring any of this goodness to his new trilogy, if it even happens. I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to announce that his particular trilogy really is just going to go to Disney Plus, if they're just going to move it to Disney Plus and focus on the Game of Thrones guys going forward. Anyway, this has gone on for quite some time. I just wanted to break this article down and showcase exactly how dumb it is, because it is. It's just a fluff piece trying to bolster up a director who is a good at what he does, but he's a terrible storyteller, and in no way is Rian Johnson the savior of Star Wars. So if you made it this far, do me a favor, type Star Wars into the chat. Give me your thoughts, your opinions. Let me know down in the comment section. I'll talk to you guys later. Have yourself a great day, and peace out. Hey, thank you so much for watching the video. I greatly appreciate it. While you're here, feel free to check out that subscribe button. You know, help with the channel out. Or you can watch any of the newest videos and make sure that you're caught up to date with what's going on in Hollywood and entertainment. So that way, when you're at work tomorrow, you can wow your friends with the information you learned from watching these videos. That's right. I said it. Subscribe.